It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith, and you heard Brandon Rossai, which means Alan Saunders back on the pod with me today. Thanks to DB for jumping on yesterday, but we got the boys back together. How we doing, Alan?
We're doing good. Had the condensed schedule this week kind of prevent normal timing, and I felt like that was the best way to work it out. So you got DB yesterday, you got me today, you got your normal dose of Smitty, and here we go.
Which I'm sure everybody is very happy about having their normal dose of Smitty in their life.
I think so.
I jokingly said that you didn't join yesterday. It was your Festivus. That's why you didn't want to join the podcast yesterday. You were airing grievances.
I got a lot of problems with you people, and now you're going to hear about it.
Well, and that's why we didn't get to hear from you for one day, because you were airing your grievances elsewhere. But no, in all seriousness, great to have you back today. Let's dive into some stuff here. Obviously, we're going to go through the injury report. Feels weird, though, to be given predictions on a Tuesday, but that's exactly what we're going to do later in the episode. First, going through the injury report, I was mentioning this to DB yesterday, but it actually felt pretty nice. Pleasantly surprised as I go through the injury report here, and even better today, now not seeing any injury designation for George Pickens, Donte Jackson, DeShon Elliott, and Larry Ogunjobi. Obviously, Joey Porter Jr., Ben Skoranek out. But other than that, getting those four back, that's a big deal for this team. And I don't think that can be overstated. So obviously, for the first time in like a month, I'd say pretty good news going into a game.
Yeah, you still obviously would want Joey Porter,
Sure.
number one corner. That's a big loss. But I think getting Donte Jackson back helps a lot, especially when you have a real speed demon like Xavier Worthy to deal with. Jackson's probably the fastest guy in the Steelers secondary. So that's definitely a big plus. And then DeShon Elliott, man. Like, if the Steelers come in here with Elliott back after what happened the last 2 weeks, I'm not saying this is my prediction, but like if they hold the Chiefs to like 20 points or less, like, we got to start talking about DeShon Elliott as, like, one of the best players in the league. Like, it still looked like a completely different defense without him in there the last 2 weeks. I know it's not all him, but, man, he's been really, really good this year.
It's almost like he's like a player and a half, at least, right? Because he changes the role for Minkah. Like, and I'm not saying Minka's played bad in that, but, like, it changes what he has to do for this defense. So it's not just DeShon Elliott, but it's also what he does for the people around him when he is on the field.
He does that. He minimizes the exposure of Beanie Bishop as a slot corner because they play the three safety nickel more. He's a really good tackler against the run. I just think he's, and they've missed 20 tackles in the last 2 weeks or something absurd like that without him in there. Huge difference. And I think Larry Ogunjobi will be a big deal in terms of stopping the run and keeping Patrick Mahomes from stepping up into passing lanes. Larry doesn't get necessarily a ton of pressures, but I think he's really disciplined and doesn't let people step around him and get behind him and get upfield. And I think they will certainly need that with Mahomes, who has a sort of otherworldly ability to find those gaps in your rush and then make you pay for leaving them there by finding guys downfield.
Yeah, credit to them in terms of what they did against Saquon largely as a run defense, but the way that Baltimore ran against them, I was like, man, I know that we don't talk about Larry a ton because like the pass rush production isn't necessarily there, but I thought it really stood out, his absence against Baltimore. And I think that for the exact reason that you're saying, and also just like being able to keep the linebackers cleaner, like I thought that was an issue for them, obviously against Baltimore as well. The run fits weren't as good. I thought that they were a mess. So yeah, I think Larry getting back is obviously big too, but the one that everybody's kind of been waiting for just because of what this offense has looked like with and without him, obviously getting George Pickens back in the mix as well. You've gotten to, lay eyes on him. I know there's been video of him, at least in terms of where he looks like he's been at in those clips and what you've seen as opposed to what do you feel like he is close to 100%? Like what version of George do you think we're getting?
I think he will be very close to 100%. I think he might have been close to 100% if he had played on Saturday. The big thing with the hamstring, of course, as we talk about all the time, is it's not about how healthy you feel. It's about how likely you are to re-injure it, right? And so I think, the team playing it safe because a re-injury and aggravation at this stage of the calendar is probably season ending. So play it safe, give him one more game. I think makes sense for George. Probably the same thing with Elliott. I think both of those guys probably could have played last week, but didn't. I think you'll be looking at near full versions of both of them in this game. A little less sure about Larry, just because defensive linemen aren't exactly doing a ton of like sprinting in practice in general. So a little less sure about where he is health-wise, but I feel pretty good. And then Donte Jackson, you hope he can get through the game. He looked okay at times. He also didn't look great in the first half of Philly, even before he was injured. So, like, I really have no idea what to expect in terms of how he will look when he's out there and how likely he is to be able to finish this game after not being able to finish the last two that he was in.
Yeah, does that like become a concern or change the helmet math if you have to think, do we have to dress an extra DB because of, the way that we've seen Donte be able to obviously start games but not be able to finish them? Like, he's only missed the one game.
I think Corey Trice is gonna get. Corey Trice is gonna play because Porter's out. I don't know that they will dress another one, but they had been dressing one less defensive back with Elliott and Jackson both down. So like Porter will come out of the lineup. Elliott and Jackson will both come into the lineup. I don't think another defensive back will come out. I think they will go back to having one more defensive back so that they're a little bit protected with two guys coming back from injury in this game. You never know when you could lose one of them, and Jackson's already been banged up a ton this year. So yeah, I think they will continue to dress the extra defensive back at the expense of what other position, I'm not exactly sure. My guess would be probably see Dean Lowry get sat down, but we'll see where they go from there.
And on the Chiefs side of things, obviously the big one that we're watching is with Chris Jones there. Right now, questionable as well as Jawan Taylor. And then a couple players already rolled out, and DJ Humphries and Chamari Connor, who's their starting nickel or has been for quite some time. DJ Humphries, obviously a tackle that they've just brought in not that long ago. I think he only ended up playing one game before he suffered an injury there. And then Taylor, obviously, they're starting right tackle. And Chris Jones is the straw that stirs that drink defensively. I mean, he's really what makes the engine go. They have some other good players, obviously, on that side of the ball. And DB talked about guys at all levels for them. But really, without him, like, what does that defense look like when he's not in the middle of all of it?
It's not a bad defense without him. It just becomes a lot more predictable because he's a guy that you can line up anywhere, and they don't have anybody else that you're going to be able to do that with. I actually looked up his snap chart from PFF, and I know I don't say good things about them very often, but the positional alignment charting that you can see where guys line up. It's actually extremely useful. And one of the reasons I am at PFF almost every day, but I was looking at it from last game, like, where have his snaps been coming from to see where it's going to hurt them. And it was 11 snaps outside the tackle, 16 snaps over the tackle, and 17 snaps in the B gap. So like pretty much everywhere is where you can expect to see Chris Jones lined up. And nobody else is going to do that. I mean, they have other guys. George Karlaftis is a dude on the edge. They even have some younger guys. Felix Onudike Amazoa, I think is how you pronounce it. He's a young guy
a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, Kansas State. He's a good player, and they have some other guys as well. But nobody that's going to be as unpredictable as Chris Jones, I think, just makes them a lot easier to deal with because of you never know where he's going to line up.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but Spags really does a nice job at getting him a lot of one-on-ones, and not just getting one-on-ones, but like finding where the weakness is on the offensive line and getting him a one-on-one in that alignment. And that's why you see him move around so much. So that kind of takes me into what I want to talk about next. You got a question. I want to say this one was actually from Blue Sky about a rookie wall. We talked about this quite a bit, but we haven't talked about with this group of Steelers, Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, specifically on the offensive line, because we talked about Mason McCormick's performance in that last one a little bit, but not necessarily real in depth. Is that a concern for you, especially in this matchup? Say Chris Jones is able to go and, again, Spags does a real nice job at getting his guys loose for one-on-ones. One, what do we make of this? Do we expect to see them hitting a rookie wall? Is that what's happening right now with their play? And how worrisome would that be to see one of those guys have to go against Chris Jones?
Yeah, this is from Rhodes for ISU on Blue Sky. I have no idea if this is actually Paul Rhodes or the former
I believe, yeah, I'm going to say it is. Yep.
Iowa State head coach, or if it's someone else. I don't know if Paul Rhodes is still coaching anywhere. Interesting. The former Pitt Panthers defensive coordinator and Iowa State head coach. And I've lost track of him now, to be honest. I don't know if he's still around, but hilarious handle there.
Linebackers coach or outside linebackers coach at Boston College.
Okay. Interesting spot for the dear Paul Rhodes. Asked about whether there's any concern about Frazier and McCormick hitting the rookie wall. And I absolutely think there is. You know, I think in general, when you're talking about closer to the football guys, the harder it is to adjust to the NFL level. I think those two guys did an outstanding job of it initially. But you are talking about a longer season, a longer schedule than either of them have played. Although Mason McCormick has played some long seasons. You know, in the FCS, if you're pretty good, you keep playing through that playoff bracket for a while. So he has had some longer seasons, but I didn't think he was very good against the Ravens last week. So I do think there's a concern there if you're talking about just, you know, that kind of rookie wall thing. And it's not just physical, you know, it's everything. But yeah, he's had 2 15 game seasons at South Dakota State. So right crossing that threshold here for the Steelers as we enter week 16, obviously with a couple weeks to go. The real nice thing is after they get through this game, you know, 11 days off between now and the Bengals game, that gives them a nice little reset here heading into the postseason. I think that'll really help with physically anyway, not only all those injured guys we talked about, but also these rookies kind of getting a chance to take a deep breath and get themselves right before we hit the postseason. I think that sets up pretty nicely for the Steelers. Obviously, this congested stretch of schedule has been really challenging, but there is a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel on the other side of it.
And, you know, these guys, they're always going to say that they're prepared for anything. They were preparing to be starters out of the gate and everything like that. Mason McCormick's not necessarily out of the gate, but still very early in the season. But, like, you know, if everything would have gone well for this team health-wise, Mason McCormick wouldn't even be starting at all. Like, we wouldn't have seen much of Mason McCormick this year, if any. Don't know. I mean, I think we both
might not have seen Frazier. I mean, Herbig had that spot. He was doing okay. I mean, I assume that we would have eventually, but it's not like it was a sure thing.
Yeah, I think you would have seen the transition, but to your point, yeah, like, you know, Herbig was the starter at the time that he had suffered an injury, and then, like, they probably had a good feel about where Cole Holcomb was, and obviously, like, everything like that, but Peyton Wilson playing the amount that he has, even if you want to switch it to the defensive side, include him, too, like, do you think that also plays into it as well? Like, these guys are playing probably more snaps than we would have thought. I'm not saying necessarily where the team envisioned or what they envisioned, but certainly from the outside looking in, they've played more than we think they would have.
Yeah, I mean, I think Peyton Wilson has been the one guy who kind of has had the rookie season that we all expected him to, right? Where it was just like, you know, sort of slow build up, gets a small role, plays heavily in some games and maybe less heavily in others. He's kind of had the one normal one. It's been, you know, through the fire hose for Wilson and Frazier, and then obviously Roman Wilson. I'm sorry, not Wilson and Frazier, from Frazier McCormick, and then Roman Wilson and Fautanu look like totally lost seasons for injury. Another question about an update for Roman Wilson. Still see him running every day. I think he is available if they would feel like they would need to bring him back, but I'm not sure I would expect it at this point unless there's an injury at the receiver position, just because of the length of time it's been since he's been practicing. I think it's hard to imagine him having much of an impact at this point. So I think they're, you know, trending towards sort of a medical redshirt season for Roman Wilson. But yeah, I mean, anytime you're talking about any player, not just rookies, playing a lot more than you really thought they would, you wonder if they're able to do it. Once you get somebody, you know, to a place they've never been before, you never know if they're going to be able to handle it or not. And so, yeah, I think there is some uncertainty there.
Yeah. All right. Well, good stuff. We'll see how those guys respond, starting with tomorrow against the Kansas City Chiefs, but it just still seems so wild to me that they're already playing tomorrow. I understand from Saturday to Wednesday, same amount of time between Sunday and Thursday, but it just seems super weird they're playing on a Wednesday.
It's not the same amount of time because it's a 1:00 kick. And they were a 4:30 kick on Saturday.
That's true. Yeah.
So like it's almost another half a day's difference if you compare like a 1 p.m. Sunday to a regular Thursday night kick, and also they had to travel in there. So like, coming back from Philly, these guys weren't home until I don't know what time, 11, 12 Saturday night, big difference.
Yeah.
This is really tough.
It is. Yeah. I wasn't really taking that in consideration. I was just thinking about the days of the week, but you're right. But okay, anyways, let's start to dive into this. For the first time in a couple weeks, talking about a different opponent here in Kansas City Chiefs. When is the last time that we played them? I'm like trying to go through my Rolodex here. Was it the playoff game?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously, how that went. But anyways, so as we dive in, as you look at this Kansas City offense, I think one thing that's very interesting and jumps out to me, want to get your take on just the overall picture, obviously, of this Kansas City offense. They're pretty average across the board, other than one thing that they are very good at is converting on third down. 51%. First in the NFL in terms of their third down conversion percentage. The explosive plays haven't been there. Second fewest explosive plays in the NFL. Maybe that continues to change. They just got Hollywood Brown back in the mix, so maybe him being a different element for that offense. Obviously, Isaiah Pacheco was down for a while. They're still working him back in. But it's been a lot of like dinking and dunking, nickel and diming you down to the red zone, and then they'll see if they can punch it in. They're still bottom 10 in terms of their red zone effectiveness. They've gotten a little bit better since the beginning of the year, but this just feels like a very different Kansas City offense where they're just very reliant on Patrick and his playmaking and getting it done just enough to win these football games and being very good on the money downs. When you look at this Kansas City offense, what do you see?
I see a really bad offensive line, first and foremost. They are just not really well put together. When you look at some of the things they're asking Travis Kelce to do in terms of chipping and just straight up blocking, I don't know that I have data for this, but I don't really remember the times that I've seen the Chiefs recently, him having the level of blocking responsibility that he's had this year. It's a lot. And so obviously that's taking a really good playmaker out of a route if you're doing that. And so I think that definitely is something that stands out to me. They're moving pieces around to try to fit. Joe Thuney is a Pro Bowler at guard, is going to play left tackle because of how bad Wanya Morris was. But then if Morris might end up playing anyway because they have an injury. So
Humphreys and Taylor, who knows?
Yeah, Jawan Taylor, who also is not like, it's sort of like if you think of like who's a tackle that's really struggled in the NFL the last 2 seasons, Jawan Taylor is the guy that might come to your mind first and foremost, and he's like the one guy they have playing tackle who kind of belongs right now. So yeah, it's not a good
kind of the poster boy for those tackles leaving early as well.
He is absolutely that. I assume that TJ Watt, if Taylor does play, will be in the officials' ear from minute one about that. Interested to see how Alex Highsmith and Joe Thuney match up. I kind of like that one for Highsmith, especially with his quickness around the edge and his repertoire of moves. A guy who doesn't normally play tackle is not going to deal with the Smitty sort of spin, ghost, rip, long arm combo. Like not too many interior players doing all that. And so I think that's a nice matchup for the Steelers. But in general, I think this team just, like you said it, like they're unimpressive, except that they lean on Patrick Mahomes. But like leaning on Patrick Mahomes is like the single one best thing that any team in the NFL can do. Like it's still good enough. And they're really good in situational football. I think you mentioned like third downs. I'm just going to increase the situational football in general. They're really good in a 2-minute drill. They don't make mistakes to let teams back in the game. Andy Reid is a really good clock management head coach. And that's why when like they win a bunch of close games, it's not a fluke. It's not lucky. Like they are good at those things. And I think you see it week in and week out. Like it's easy to recognize.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I do think that it's interesting, like you said, when you got Mahomes, when you got Andy Reid, they've been able to do enough. You would think the utilization of Travis Kelce, the fact they've been using him that way, they aren't going to be able to really stray away from that against these edge rushers. If that's the case, if they've been having to use him in that manner. So I'll be curious to see how they utilize him. Obviously, Hopkins has helped out a ton in terms of the third down stuff. That's what he's kind of been brought there to do and hopefully improve I say hopefully from their standpoint, not the Steelers standpoint, what they've done in the red zone as well. But I think it's interesting if you're the Steelers defensively matching up with them. Obviously, no Joey Porter Jr. in this one. How do you kind of go about attacking it? Obviously, you get some pieces back in DeShon Elliott, Donte Jackson, Larry Ogunjobi. What's the blueprint here, or at least the best chance they have to keep Patrick Mahomes in this offense down?
I think you got to tackle the catch. You know that you're going to see some cover three. You know you're going to see some open guys underneath. Guys like Kelce, Pacheco, Hunt are all really adept in those areas. And you can't let them go for big plays. You got to tackle them once they catch the ball. To me, I think that's the biggest thing is that like they don't run the ball very well. And so like, I don't think you have to worry about what happened last week with Derrick Henry. But I think you kind of do have to worry about what happened against, say, the Colts and again what happened against the Eagles. I think that's like more of the matchup, right? Where it's like you got to tackle the guys after the catch. It's not a quarterback you want to blitz very much, if at all, ever. He will make you pay for that. So it's got to be pressure with 4 and then tackle the catch. I think that's really the way. You're not going to stop them, but you can make them take a really long time to score. You can stop them in the red zone a little bit. And that, to me, is, I think, the way forward for any defense that's trying to attack this Chiefs offense.
Which, you talk about the tackling. I think that's been obviously a big talking point over the last couple of weeks because the Steelers have not been very good in that one area. And I understand you haven't had DeShon Elliott, but like, how much does that change for everybody else? What do you make of that? Is it just, the teams that they're playing specifically making them miss tackles? Is there something that you can go back and look at and say, for whatever reason, fundamentally, they've gotten away from the last couple of weeks? Why have the Steelers the last couple of weeks really had an issue with tackling?
I think missed tackles happen because you're not in the right place most of the time. Sometimes guys just get beat. Beanie Bishop is a little dude and somebody runs him over, like whatever, like that happens. But most of the time, I think missed tackles happen because you're not in the right alignment. You're not fitting the run correctly. So like it's just details. I think details is mostly what missed tackles boil down to. And I think the other part of it is, like, I think the Ravens got them confused a bunch when they were making changes at the line of scrimmage, motion shifts, and all that window dressing. Like, the entire goal of all that the offense is doing is that get one guy 2 feet out of the right spot. And I think it just happened to the Steelers way too much, where they got caught communicating when they should have been getting to a spot. They got caught unsure about what a teammate was going to do until they saw him do it. And then by then it was too late to react to it. And so I don't really, maybe that's short week football in some ways, but last week wasn't an exceptionally short week, but the Steelers really did not practice at all in between those 2 weeks. But it can't happen, not with a defense this good, this experienced, this talented.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, let's flip the script then and talk about Steelers offense versus Chiefs defense a little bit, which is so funny to me. Inversely here, the Chiefs are pretty good defensively across the board. The one thing that they are middle of the pack in, actually 20th in the NFL, 40.5 third down percentage allowed. Obviously, they look a little bit different on the back end of things. L'Jarius Sneed, they let go to Tennessee. They didn't want to pay him, did the tag and trade thing there. They've kind of just been able to churn out defensive backs, whether they take them a little bit higher, like a Trent McDuffie, or in the case of like L'Jarius Sneed, where they draft them lower, develop them. But they haven't had necessarily that other guy step up in the way that he had. I think that's been a big part of that, why they aren't as good on third down this year. But again, I talked about Chris Jones and how he kind of makes this whole thing go. When you look at this defense, what do you see? What's the ways to attack them?
Yeah, I think this is a defense that misses L'Jarius Sneed. I think that's a loss that they did not really. They were not really able to replace. And I think it's obvious, but I don't think that makes it a bad defense. It's just probably not a dominant one anymore. I don't know where they rank kind of overall. They're sort of middle of the tier, if I remember correctly, in terms of just sort of overall scoring defense. But I think without Chris Jones, it's really hard to say he's their best player. But I do really like their linebackers. I like Leo Chenal, and I like Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquil. Like, I think they have good linebacker play. I just think you can probably find some big plays against their defense if you hunt and peck well enough down the field. There's holes to be made in coverage. It's huge that George Pickens is back for this game, because I think that almost sort of makes them put McDuffie on him, and then I think that opens up a bunch for somebody else somewhere else.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. People were talking about McDuffie didn't seem quite as effective having to play outside because they haven't had that other guy, like Josh Williams hasn't stepped up in the way I think that they were hoping for. They haven't had anybody really else step up to do so. So McDuffie was playing on the outside, put him back inside. Actually, it got an interception, got another one after not having one his entire Chiefs tenure, which seemed pretty wild. Within like 2 weeks, he got two. But so he's been more productive once they put him in the slot. But they haven't had that guy outside. So I think that's like a big thing too, is he going to travel around with George? Is he going to play inside because that's where they've gotten the best version of him, or do they need him to play outside? And if so, like, I don't know. I feel like Calvin Austin started to come on. I'm curious to see what his role could be if McDuffie kind of just does move around with George Pickens. Could that be the guy to circle within the offense this week, is Calvin Austin?
Yeah, and you mentioned Shamari Connor out. Undrafted rookie slot corner Christian Roland Wallace will be the guy that'll probably draw Calvin Austin. I think that's a winning matchup for the Steelers, and one they should look to exploit. Obviously the Steelers have shown that just because you're undrafted doesn't mean that you're unplayable. Beanie Bishop, but Christian Roland Wallace, 4.63 40-yard dash coming out of USC this spring. Not what I want against Calvin Austin.
Yeah, I'm curious. You're curious to see how you have to deploy the safeties on the back end too, over top of things, to keep a lid on Calvin Austin and George Pickens for that matter as well. What about a guy like Pat Freiermuth? Because I think a lot's been made, especially over the last week, especially like Art got asked directly about his involvement within the offense. We've obviously talked about that on here a couple times. We had a question about his involvement and if it's been, a little bit underwhelming in terms of the utilization of Pat Freiermuth. Does this seem like a matchup to you, that because we just talked about the linebackers and what they offer there and what they can do in coverage? Obviously, Reed as well on the back end.
I was going to mention Reed.
Yeah,
I don't think this is like an exceptionally exploitable matchup for Pat Freiermuth or anything like that. I mean, they just got to get him the ball when he's open. I don't know. He was open too much last week. I know Russ has a hard time seeing the middle of the field, but it's not always in the middle of the field. I don't understand what the issue is, but it certainly is an issue. And probably the biggest thing that you could easily correct from the offense last week to this week is just throw the ball to Pat when he's open. It's really not that hard.
Yeah, fifth among tight ends and expected points added is Pat Freiermuth. And I think that the interesting part about it, for me at least, is just like to see if there's an emphasis on that. I'm not saying to force him the ball or anything like that, but sometimes when you see these become a talking points, and I'm not saying that they are within the room or anything like that, but with Art being asked directly about it, like we saw, and I'm not comparing the players or anything like that in the situation, we saw what happened when there was conversation surrounding AJ Brown not getting the football. What happened the very next game? Just curious to see if that translates here as well in the same way.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Maybe, the thing is, it's hard to force, as Art said, it's kind of hard to force targets to a tight end. It's a little easier to force targets to a wide receiver. Because it's a little bit too easy for the defense to just smother where he's going at times, especially teams that run the ball well and are drawing guys to the line of scrimmage in general. A lot of the times anyway. Maybe some screen work. I think Pat's a good screen player. I think especially if they're without Jones, you're going to have guys in different positions, sort of uncomfortable surroundings. It's probably a good screen fit game. And I think Jaylen Warren is a good matchup for this team as well, in terms of guys that you can get loose in the passing game. I do like those linebackers, but I think Jaylen Warren is really good on the edge, and as a rusher or as a yak guy, there's some opportunity there.
Well, actually, before we get into our predictions, I'm glad that you brought that up because it wasn't on my mind to bring up. But we saw Jaylen Warren kind of take control of the backfield last game. Something you expect to see continue? Was it just the game script or flow of the game, or what do you think was the reason we saw that take place?
they were trailing one. And so, Jalen usually plays in their kind of auto pass situations, the shotgun 2-minute. They also had a 2-minute drill at the end of the first half, which Jalen played in. So I think that the two drives there where it's like in sort of we are throwing mode, it's sort of can forgive those. But I thought that was the best job they had done all year of managing the workload between the two backs and getting them both going. I expect that to continue. I thought the amount that they used Jalen opened things up for Najee and vice versa. And I don't know why it took that long for them to figure that out.
Yeah, I'm not sure. All right, let's get into some predictions here then before we get out of here. Obviously, if you guys are new to the show, if you are, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and then be sure to come back for everyone after this. We give a bold prediction, at least one, and then we also do a score prediction. Alan, do you want to start?
I'm completely unprepared for the bold prediction. You go. You got one?
Okay, my bold prediction is going to be on the offensive side of the ball. And I didn't use this last week. And I know I kind of alluded to where I'm going with this, honestly, anyway, with the way I was kind of talking about it. I didn't use this last week. I went with the Calvin Austin direction, but we're going the Pat Freiermuth direction this week. I think you look on the other side and you see a superstar tight end in Travis Kelce. I think it's the tight end on the opposite team that steals the show this week. I think he gets, I'm not going to say he's going, I brought up the numbers last week, no 10 catch games in his career, only 100 yard, only scored 2 tight ends or 2 touchdowns once in his career. I'm just going to say if this can count, one of those things changes, whether it's a 10 catch game, whether he goes over 100 yards or he has 2 touchdowns in this game. One of those things is going to happen.
All right. I like it. It is definitely bold, but I like the logic of it there. Man, I am just totally I'm gonna I don't know how bold this is. It's probably not bold enough. See, I'm struggling here, Smitty. I'm struggling.
Well, throw out what was on your mind, and I'll tell you if it can count. You said it's not bold.
I think Donte Jackson gets an interception in this game. Okay. He'll be back in the lineup. I think Mahomes makes plays, but he also
have 11.
He also puts the ball in danger, and Jackson is the guy that like collects a lot of those like off a guy's hands, tip balls, miscommunicate. Like he is not out there out wrestling guys for interceptions. He's the Johnny on the spot guy, and I see Mahomes letting one of those go, and so that's why I'm not sure how bold that is. I think Dante's the Steelers' leading interception getter, and Mahomes has more than his fair share. So. I'll say, but I'll say Donte Jackson gets or do I want to go this way? Okay, I'll go this way. Steelers get a pick 6 against Mahomes.
Ooh,
I'll go that way.
Okay. Well, those both could happen. Both of those could happen on one play.
But I'll go that way, a little bit more bold. I think they'll play a ton of zone, which sets them up to read the quarterback's eyes and break on the ball. And I think I'll go Steelers defense with a pick 6.
Can I tell you, I would have accepted Donte because that would be a new career high for him, I believe.
It also would be like 20 career interceptions for him, I believe. He's been right on that. He's been talking about that line for a while. I think it's 20. He hasn't to yet.
Okay. So that's why I would have, because it would be a season milestone as well as, so I think that's why I would have counted it. But
he's already set a season high. 5 is his.
Oh, is he? Okay, so he's only had 4 before this. Yes. Interesting. Okay.
4 as a rookie, he had 4.
Okay. I do remember talking about that now.
His next one will be his 20th in his career. But pick 6 is bolder. I'm going with that.
Yeah. All right. There we go. Let us know yours for those as well. And then from a score standpoint, Alan, I'll be honest. I have felt this way about this game for a while. I didn't know if injuries were going to deter me from picking this. However, we got enough guys back where I feel like I can stand on business with this prediction. I have said the Steelers are going to beat the Chiefs on Christmas for months. And I believe the Steelers are going to beat the Chiefs on Christmas. This final score of this game will be 26-20. The Pittsburgh Steelers win. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
I like the confidence. I don't think I agree. I hate to be the Grinch, but I think this Chiefs team is simply a better team overall. And then when you get Mahomes in there, I think it gets lopsided. Honestly, think on paper this should be a pretty easy win for Kansas City. I'm not expecting it to be that easy. But I'll say I think this will be a game where the way the Chiefs have done this recently is they've won a ton of close games. But if you look at the last 2 weeks, I mean, that Cleveland game was 14 points and not that close. Like they could have won that by 30. Last week, I thought they really dominated the Texans, and it was what was that, an 11-point win, 9-point win, something like that.
8.
8.
27-19.
Yeah. I didn't think it was that close either. I'm going with the Steelers haven't lost 2 straight games by 2 touchdowns since 2003. I have no idea how far you have to go back to find the last time they lost 3 straight games by 2 touchdowns, but I'm picking Kansas City 28-13.
Oof. Okay. Now, obviously not knowing what that looks like just based off looking at the box score and seeing another double digits point multiple possession loss for the Steelers, would then the conversation change for you in terms of where this team is or no? You still feel okay about them?
No, I don't think it would really change very much for me. I think that's kind of who they are. I think they have the ability to make it a lot closer than that. I do think they have the ability to win the game, but I think Kansas City is I think people will be talking about Kansas City differently as a people have not been talking about Kansas City like the Super Bowl favorites that I think they are. And I think on national TV in front of the whole league, people are going to be like, oh my God, we've actually been sleeping on the 14-1 reigning 2-time Super Bowl champions. And they just went out and beat the crap out of a pretty good Steelers team. And oh yeah, they are the team to beat in the AFC and in the entire league until they lose. And they just reminded us all of that.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping they would have like that offensive breakout game prior to this game happening because I'm concerned about that.
I feel like it's been
I just
coming.
keep waiting for it to
The
happen.
defense has been really good the last 2 weeks. I know they might not have Jones, but I feel like it's coming.
Yeah.
And I
was going to ask too, are you taking that
into
consideration with this? Like, which way are you putting him in the lineup with this? Out of doesn't matter. It wouldn't change anything with Chris Jones. I don't
think I think I kind of hedged it. I think it. Yeah, I don't. I'm figuring he's probably not going to be 100% if he does play.
Yeah, I am considering him out of this game when I make my prediction.
If he's totally out, I would say it would probably be a little closer. But
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
And just some breaking news here as the show wraps up. The Ravens have listed Zay Flowers as questionable and have already ruled Nelson Aguilar out for tomorrow. And don't forget, Rashad Bateman barely played last week.
Yeah, one reception, but it was a touchdown.
Yeah, in interesting times for the Ravens. That game doesn't matter too much to the Steelers if they win, but if they lose, a Ravens loss to the Texans would basically be a do-over from Pittsburgh's standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I said the Steelers were going to go 2-2 within this 4-game stretch. They've lost.
I might add that to my prediction. I'm going to add to my prediction. The Steelers lose 28-13, and the Ravens lose to the Texans. So when the Steelers beat the Bengals next week, they will still clinch the AFC North.
Okay. All right. You know what? I feel better about it all of a sudden. I was gonna, call you Scrooge on the way out of here when I had told the people where to find you, but I don't feel so bad about it now. I'm sure people in the comments are still, not going to be happy with you picking against the Steelers, but anyways, before we get out of here, Alan, tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account. SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so I can get paid, please. My family wants gifts, and I'm just here with the pockets out of the pants. Guy on the Monopoly card. I'm joking, obviously, but do really appreciate all your support, especially at this time of the year. And like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications on the YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of Steelers Morning Rush, Steelers Afternoon Drive, Sights and Sounds, post-game, spotlight, all the good stuff here we have at the Steelers Now YouTube channel and anywhere you find podcasts.
There you go. And if you are listening to this somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok. Find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. And I would be remiss if, on behalf of us, we didn't wish you guys a very, very Merry Christmas. Hope you enjoy it with your families. It's my favorite time of year from basically Thanksgiving until now. Best time of year, in my opinion. And then I turn into the Scrooge post-Christmas. So that's kind of where we're at. But anyways, be sure to do that for us. We appreciate all the support that we've gotten over here. It's allowed me to go and get a Turbo Man. Fought Arnold Schwarzenegger in the parking lot right before coming on here. So appreciate y'all. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.